Yesterday, Mayor Wu officially unveiled Boston's FY26 budget, part of her legal duty to present the budget by the second Wednesday in April. While the mayor didn't send out an advance copy of her speech, the details of what she said yesterday were already public. That is because these details were laid out in a letter Mayor Wu sent to the City Council on Monday, which accompanied a series of official actions for the FY26 budget. BPI has 11 takeaways from Mayor Wu's letter and yesterday's event. Most of this is new spending. For trash collection, new technology, building new community centers, and investing in changes at the election department brought on by state receivership. And there are also some interesting stats about the budget, like how the $300 million in federal funds that's been discussed recently isn't actually in the budget, and how Mayor Wu's proposed investments in new school construction mirror a proposal from Mayor Walsh 5 years ago. Keep watching for where to find each line in the letter and where you can find more about the particular issue in the city's FY26 budget. Number 1, the $4.8 billion FY26 annual operating budget and $4.5 billion 5-year and FY26 to 30 capital plan. You can check out all of the FY26 budget documents through the link in our Substack, and we're going to be in all our coverage using the full budget document. That's the mayor's letter, the executive summary, and all 3 volumes of the budget combined into a single document. Number 2, over $300 million of federal funds supporting critical city services each year. This $300 million figure drew a lot of attention when Mayor Wu used it in an exchange of budget letters with the council's Ways and Means Chair Brian Worrell last week, and she used the line again in her letter this week. At that time, and again in the current budget, there wasn't a lot of context. Fortunately, at yesterday's budget event, Yawu Miller, a longtime journalist who just launched his own news site, The Flip Side, which I encourage you to check out, asked a question about this number. The answer from CFO Grafenberger revealed that this money is not in the budget presented today. Here is that exchange.
The $300 million that we're expected to lose from federal, does that include HUD, any cuts to HUD, or is that part of the budget?
Yeah, so that $300 million includes funding that we receive from HUD. And to be clear, that $300 million is not part of the 4.8. We manage that externally, but still it does support many critical services in the city, including housing through HUD.
This is an important reminder that the numbers provided by Mayor Wu and her top budget officials frequently need added context and as a result must be taken with a grain of salt. Number 3, the FY26 budget will see modest growth in the streets cabinet of $12.8 million or 6.6% related to new improved trash collection contracts that provide additional contracted labor and require more reliable trucks and technology. Outside of this line, there are only 2 additional details about this spending in the budget. 12.7 of the $12.8 million increase is going to the Department of Public Works. And in the Department of Public Works detailed budget, waste reduction is seeing its non-personnel budget go from $69 million in FY25 to $81 million in FY26. So that's where all of this spending is happening. Number 4, the Information and Technology Cabinet's budget will grow in FY26 by $4.1 million or 7.7% as they lead efforts in partnership with the Community Engagement Cabinet and all the service delivery departments to build out a new 311 constituent relationship management technology and permitting and licensing systems, improving constituents' experience reporting issues, requesting services, and obtaining permits. As with the increased spending for DPW, there is no additional information on what the increased spending is for in the Department of Innovation and Technology's detailed budget. There is noticeable increased spending in enterprise applications and infrastructure, but no additional detail. Number 5, the FY26 budget also includes investments in the Elections Department to help implement necessary operational reforms and improvements. This is interesting because last year, the election department did a terrible job running the November 2024 general election, with many precincts running out of ballots and the elections department refusing to answer hundreds of calls, including from city councilors and state election officials, for hours. The fiasco prompted an investigation by Secretary of the Commonwealth William Galvin, which resulted in a conclusion that the elections department needed to go into receivership. Secretary Galvin announced that back in February. The letter and budget does not mention any of that. But in the FY26 budget, the city is doing 2 things. First, moving elections from its former home as part of the mayor's office over to the People Operations, and second, increasing the elections budget 13.6% or $879,000. The executive summary reports the increased spending is for, quote, increased costs due to early and mail-in voting, as well as needing to print ballots for municipal elections, end quote. What role state receivership played in the budget increase and department move are both questions BPI will be looking for in the upcoming budget hearings. Number 6. The capital plan includes over $6 million for the implementation of key technology systems. The plan also invests over $188 million in state of good repair needs for municipal facilities, including community centers, libraries, firehouses, police stations, and city halls. These projects are found across the budget. But some of the specific detail on which civics buildings this $188 million will be spent on was laid out in the executive summary. There's construction will start on a new BCYF Dorchester Community Center in Grove Hall with $40 million in FY26. A new expanded study that will begin to explore how to best advance the Jackson Man Community Center in Alston Brighton, a longtime issue for City Councilor Liz Braden, who represents that district. But it isn't clear how much money has been dedicated for that. There isn't anything in the budget about a Jackson Man for the Jackson Man Community Center. Improvements and repairs to the Tobin Community Center has $3.2 million budgeted in FY26. $12 million is budgeted in FY26 for construction on the Fields Corner Branch Library. $500,000 is budgeted in FY26 for building the Chinatown Branch Library. And there's $20 million dedicated to the design and construction of the Eggleston Branch Library. The design for the South End Branch Library and construction has $30 million authorized, but the budget calls for only $1 million to be spent this year in FY26. And finally, they're replacing the roof at the Brighton Library for $250,000 in FY26. There's other examples of this for firehouses, police stations, and City Hall, and those will be addressed throughout the course of the hearings. Number 7. The capital plan will invest over $135 million over the next 5 years in sidewalk reconstruction, roadway resurfacing, and the construction of ADA-compliant curb ramps, ensuring safe, reliable, and accessible transportation for all road users. Like the $12 million for trash collection changes, while the letter says that this money is for the Streets Cabinet, it's actually going to DPW. You can check out all the projects that DPW is working on, many of which advance at least some of these goals on pages 1069 to 1098 of the full budget document. Not mentioned in the mayor's letter or the budget is that Boston is not choosing to do this work. It is being forced to do it as part of a 2021 legal settlement with disability advocates. Last summer, those plaintiffs charged Boston was not satisfying that agreement. The Universal Hub wrote, quote, "The filing says advocates were willing to cut the city a break at first because of the effects of both the pandemic and an unusually rainy year in 2021. But that the city has since failed to step up the pace as required under the agreement, which calls for the installation and repair of 15,000 ramps over 10 years. In 2023, the filing charges the city only installed or repaired 1,050 ramps compared to the 1,500 required by the consent decree." This is a really important example of what goes on in the city, which is that a lot of the work the city does here with DPW, as we're about to talk about in BPS, is not stuff that is decided on by the elected officials in Boston directly, but rather is a result of court orders and legal settlements or grant requirements that the city has to do. And it's really important because if you just read the budget, you wouldn't know about this legal settlement. Number 8. Public education represents the largest operational department budget, with FY26 budgetary growth of $45.5 million, focused on inclusive education, early childhood education, supporting multilingual learners, and providing a high-quality educational experience for every student. BPI recently produced a report on BPS's performance on 2 different agreements that the district made with state election officials over the last 5 years. These agreements are responsible for most of BPS's work on both inclusive education and multilingual learners, undertaken under Mayor Wu's administration. You should check that report out on our website, bostonpolicyinstitute.org. Boston Public Schools is the single largest part of Boston's budget, and the BPS section of the budget is from page 483 to page 519 of the full budget document. BPI will have more on what the recent report says about BPS's FY26 budget soon. The hearings for BPS are taking place on Monday and Tuesday next week. Number 9. The increase does not yet include the increased costs that will come with the inclusion of the collective bargaining contract with the Boston Teachers Union that is pending ratification and approval. The cost of the union contract is included in the Central Collective Bargaining Reserve. The Central Collective Bargaining Reserve is for unsettled union contracts, and in FY26, $102 million is budgeted. That covers not only BPS's contracts, but also contracts settled with unionized city workers and workers at the Public Health Commission. How much of the $102 million will be spent satisfying the recent contract with the Boston Teachers Union has still not been disclosed by Mayor Wu or Superintendent Skipper. We expect that question will be answered in the BPS hearings, which again will happen on Monday, April 14th, and Tuesday, April 15th next week. Number 10. The FY26 to 30 capital plan invests almost $1.2 billion in BPS facilities, accounting for 27% of the planned total investment. Moreover, 32% of all city bonds, which finance the vast majority of the capital plan, are invested in BPS. This is an interesting statistic that stood out because it so closely mirrored one delivered by Mayor Marty Walsh in his FY21 budget. Here's what it said there. Mayor Walsh announced a $1 billion investment to modernize Boston's public school infrastructure, and the Build BPS plan will guide that process. Through a dedication of city capital funds and a strong working relationship with the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the plan will more than double the city's capital spending on BPS facilities from FY18 to FY27. The FY21 to 25 capital plan will invest $438 million in BPS projects as part of an overall commitment to provide $730 million over the 10-year life of Build BPS. Mayor Walsh's plan in 2020 to spend $1 billion was made prior to the enormous run-up in construction costs brought on by COVID, inflation, increased interest rates, and now the trade war. In 2025, just renovating Madison Park Vocational Technical High School is estimated to cost north of $700 million, and that is just one of BPS's 119 school buildings, dozens of which are expected to need substantial construction projects in the coming year. What does that mean? $1 billion just doesn't go as far in 2025 as it did in 2020, and that's important to keep in mind as BPS discusses their capital plans. Number 11. The capital plan also invests $124 million in partnership with the Boston Housing Authority in the preservation and redevelopment of the Bunker Hill, Mildred Haley, and Mary Ellen McCormick sites. Poor conditions in Boston Housing Authority properties have been an issue for Mayor Wu and her BHA administrator, former District 8 City Councilor Kenzie Bach, for much of the last year. In a report released back in February, the Inspector General of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development found, quote, the authority does not consistently maintain its public housing program units in accordance with HUD's and its own requirements, end quote. Also, broken elevators in BHA properties have been an unresolved issue at a number of BHA properties since last fall. District 2 City Councilor Ed Flynn has filed a series of dockets looking for more information and a solution. The investments described in Mayor Wu's letter are not intended to address either of those problems. Rather, the Bunker Hill, Mildred Haley, and Mary Ellen McCormick sites are all places where BHA has struck deals with for-profit and nonprofit developers to rebuild existing BHA housing units and add hundreds of additional units. So, how much money is being spent here? Bunker Hill expects to see $5 million spent in FY26, and $6.1 million is budgeted for FY27 to FY30. The Mildred Haley expects to see $4 million spent in FY26, and $3 million is budgeted for FY27 to 30. And the Mary Ellen McCormick expects to see no money spent in FY26, but $20 million is budgeted for FY27 to FY30. Those are the 11 takeaways that BPI has from this budget. Make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel and follow us on Substack, We're going to be doing previews every Monday and weekly transcript roundups every Friday, talking about the big issues happening in Boston's budget process for FY26.